Good morning and welcome to a conversation about accessibility and what that has to do with e-commerce. I am joined by Paul Adam here. Unfortunately, we're not able to make it on the webcam today, so you're just going to see a picture of me in this conversation. But I'm really excited to talk about this. There's a couple of aspects. Avoiding a lawsuit can be somewhat synonymous with taxes, right? It's something that none of us really. I mean, it's kind of a painful or necessary part of doing business as a whole. But at the end of the day, what we're going to see as we talk through accessibility and making sure our website is accessible to everyone is that it actually opens the doors to people who want to use our website, but perhaps they cannot use their website due to some challenges or that they have in browsing the internet. So ultimately, this is an opportunity for us to be able to call it ahead of our competitors, to be able to show empathy to everyone that is using our website. And those are the things that really get me excited. Lawsuits, yeah, let's prevent them all day, every day. Do everything we reasonably can do. But at the end of the day, getting ahead of this and allowing it and being able to show empathy to everyone is very important. So that's why I'm really excited to do this with Paul. And again, unfortunately, you're not able to see him right now. But Paul, I don't know if you want to share exactly so what do you do normally? What do you do for your work, that sort of thing? Just give everyone a quick overview as far as who you are.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Paul J. Adam. That's my site, pauljadam.com. I'm a web and mobile accessibility specialist. Live in Austin, Texas. Um, and I've worked with a wide variety of companies doing accessibility audits, teaching them how to implement accessibility, training designers and developers how to do accessibility. So just kind of an all-around accessibility consultant, and happy to be here to talk about accessibility with y'all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. And I'm excited to be here as well, to be able to share some of this knowledge. And ultimately, Paul's going to be doing most of the talking. Accessibility is a great subject for me. I like to talk about a little bit, but Paul, as you can see, working for people like Pearson, Atlassian, State of Texas. I mean, these are some really call it highfalutin gigs that he has, and he knows what he's talking about. So I'll call it the MC of this conversation, and he will do the majority of the talking as we kind of work through the nuts and bolts of this subject. And I think one of the biggest things is, and Paul, feel free to jump in here, is we tend to think of accessibility and ADA and all that good stuff as this opportunity to sue somebody, which is ultimately for Americans is kind of a turnoff. It's like, well, why do we want to do that? Of course, to prevent a lawsuit. But ultimately, it starts with some history as far as the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. Paul, you want to kind of give a brief rundown of that?
Yeah, sure. So the ADA is the law that requires accessibility for things such as physical stores. You need ramps and accessible bathrooms, accessible parking spaces, and that law did kind of come out before the internet, was popular commerce. But like the Justice Department has said that the ADA does apply to the web, just like it does to a physical store. And there's been companies like Target was a popular example. They were one of the first to have a major lawsuit around 2008 or so. And then they, had to make their website accessible, just like they have to make their physical stores accessible. And there are some folks who've tried to say, well, if you don't have a physical store, then maybe your online store, if you're online only, doesn't have to be accessible. But that's not the way that the Department of Justice looks at it. And lawyers and lawsuits will still come at your store. If you're selling anything on the internet, you're kind of at risk for litigation. So that's why you want to make sure your site's compliant with WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That'll protect you from getting a lawsuit and also make your site just accessible to people with disabilities who want to be able to purchase products.
Absolutely. That's good. And I think these statistics, speak for themselves. And I'm not saying that as you make your website more accessible, you're going to get what a 30% bump in conversion rate. That would be really nice if that was the case. However, there is a very significant contingent, if you will, of the American population that has disabilities of one sort or another. And so it makes it so that these lawsuits are, while they're unfortunate and nobody likes them, they actually, I believe, can have a benefit to encouraging these companies, e-commerce companies, if you will, to make their website more accessible. So ultimately, the end result is better for customers, et cetera. And so the goal is, if we can get ahead of that, and to even prevent such a lawsuit from coming down the pike. And I've personally been hearing of those more and more myself. It's unfortunate, but that's why the goal of this conversation is to educate you in 15 to 30 minutes as far as what does it take to get ahead of this, so you don't even have to get your lawyer involved, and you can help make your website more accessible to everyone that is browsing it. What about the legal aspects of this? Paul, you've had a lot of experience with this. What does this look like?
Well, yeah, like to protect yourself from getting a lawsuit, you need to do things like, run automated accessibility testing tools on your site, make sure you have zero errors from those tools. It's going to be best if you have like an accessibility specialist or a user with a disability. It's accessible to them, and that will help protect you. But you also would want to do things like have an accessibility page, have a contact method that someone can, email you if they have an accessibility problem. And you still may get like demand letters. There's certain people that just kind of send them out to many sites across the internet at once and hope to find someone who might want to settle. But if your site is accessible, then you could easily, fight back against that and say, "Oh, we have done the work to make it accessible."
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's right. The other aspect of this, as I have on the slide here, is that except for a couple of states, California, Florida, Hawaii, and Illinois, people cannot sue for damages. So, like, there's obviously those states that are exception. However, basically the court's going to order compliance. Now, obviously, attorney's fees come out of that, and I think we would all argue that their attorney's fees are generally higher than we would think they should be. But at the end of the day, it's not like what it's easy to think of these type of lawsuits as is like insurance scams. They're not. They are legitimately trying to encourage this website, or ordering actually this website, to get up to compliance. So it's on a better footing than it would be if it was just people being able to make significant amounts of money, except, again, these few states here. So what if we get the letter? And Paul, you've obviously worked through a lot of situations like this. What is your recommendation as far as somebody who is listening to this, participating in this conversation? What should they do when they get this letter, or honestly a notice of a lawsuit?
Yeah, well, there are, some folks who kind of call them like trolling attorneys, or, where they send out lots of letters to lots of websites. And sometimes it's just a copy and paste letter. And they're just most of the sites on the internet are not really accessible. So they might be able to get someone settle quickly, and then they'll be happy they made that money. But, if you get it at that point, you probably, the first thing you want to do is talk to your lawyer, I would imagine, and see what you should do. And they might tell you to not even respond right away, or you may just want to start working on making your website accessible. You may want to like verify, or is our site actually not accessible? What's the level of problems? Can we work to start fixing it? Because you're going to have to do that either way. Even if you were to settle with someone who sent you a demand letter, that doesn't stop it from happening again. Anyone else can do that, and the really only way you'll be protected is if your site is accessible and conforming to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines requirements.
Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I guess it also comes down to just then patching the leaks, like getting the stuff, like you said, fixed up. as quickly as possible. Paul, in our conversations, you talked about a lawyer that does some of this resolution. I'll mention this in the after notes. Laney Feingold, excuse me.
Yep.
Yep, absolutely. So a good resource for if you do get into this challenge and perhaps your counsel doesn't.
Which is like an alternative to lawsuit.
Mhm.
They're trying to, negotiate you to come into compliance with accessibility without really trying to extract, like monetary damages as much as just trying to make you agree that you're going to do it, and it's
Mhm.
more a friendly negotiation path than your typical like lawsuit.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, let's talk about some benefits. And it's easy again to look at this as just more or less getting out of trouble, but there is some significant value that your website will achieve, enjoy, experience, whatever word you want to use there, as a result of becoming more accessible. So one aspect of this is usability. A common issue is the contrast ratios. For example, and this page is somewhat of a good example. We'll have a better example here coming up in a future slide, but you'll see the black text against a blue background. Now, if that black text started becoming more blue, so like the darkness of this started coming down, that means the contrast ratio is going to be getting closer. So ultimately, a 1-to-1 contrast ratio means that you wouldn't be able to read this text, right? It'd be both the exact same color for the text as well as the background. Now, it becomes the contrast ratio increases the darker that this text is against, or the differing in color. So I guess it could be lighter or darker. It just has to be a different color than the foreground. And so enforcing these basic ideas on your website is going to help everyone. Think about elderly relatives. And I'm sure we've all heard complaints from well, my grandmother, for example. I'll just take her as an example, where she can't browse a website. She can't click on something, or she can't read something, and she's having to zoom in, and maybe the zoom doesn't work. Like, all of these are aspects of developing an accessible website that might make it, well, that will have an impact on whether or not everyone can browse your website. Making your website be able to easily switch from landscape to portrait mode on a phone or tablet. Being able to zoom in, zoom out, changing the text size. There's part of accessibility is being able to use different font sizes, which can wreak havoc on a website that is not designed for such a thing.
Yeah.
So ultimately, go ahead, Paul, you have something to say?
Features you just mentioned are legally required by the ADA.
Mm-hmm.
It requires that you do WCAG, and the rotating your phone, responsive design, zooming in, having good color contrast. That's all required by WCAG.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That is, and that's a good point. So it's kind of a double benefit there. So it's required by accessibility, but again, it helps people be able to browse your website. Everybody browse it.
Yeah.
Or even just think about, we're outside trying to browse a website on our phone. Now, the new iPhone 14 is supposed to be better at that, but honestly, no matter how bright it is, it's still, the brightness of the screen is probably still not going to be bright enough.
Situational disability. So like that situation you're in is kind of disabled you at the moment.
Good point. Mm-hmm.
You can't hear anything, or on a train or construction, or if you're outside and it's hard to see your screen, that's kind of situational disability. Or if you broke your hand temporarily, something like that.
Excellent. Absolutely. That is some good points. Thank you.
Yeah, everything you do for accessibility is exactly what usability is recommending. If you look at usability experts like Nielsen Norman Group, they all the things they tell you to do correlate directly to accessibility. Nice thing about accessibility is that we're legally required, so it kind of gives you a little more power to say, well, we really have to do this, otherwise we could get sued, but it's actually going to make it better for everyone.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately getting a bump in conversion rate for probably the majority everyone represented here is always going to be appreciated, right? So not only do we comply legally, but we also hopefully get a bump in conversion rate, or at least it's going to reduce that friction for people who are navigating our website.
Yeah, and people with disabilities do have a lot of money to spend, and often their older individuals also have a lot of money to spend. So these are important customers for you to target.
We, as a slight anecdote, we did an audit for a company here in Kansas City a year or so back that they replatformed to a new version of Adobe Commerce, and they experienced a significant drop in conversion rate. Dissecting the analytics there, the people who spent the most on their website was, I can't remember exactly, but it was like 40s and 50s up. Like the older they got, the more they spent on the website. And that category was the category that took the hardest hit on conversion rate. Younger demographics stayed about the same conversion rate, maybe went a little bit up, but it significantly dropped off the older they got. What happened, what we traced it back to, was the font size had shrunk by at least 25%, if not closer to 40% between the old and the new. It's little things like that that can make a very significant difference in causing frustration and friction, and thus they're going to go somewhere else to find their products, probably to your competitors. Another aspect here, search engine optimization. So Google specifically, as I have written out here, I just have to say this as well. Google disclaims that it takes specific accessibility related features into their ranking system. So things like tools for making a website readable with a screen reader, and we'll talk about what that is here in a minute. Google says it does not use that as a ranking metric. So does that mean that investing in accessibility means that you don't get any bumps in search engine optimization? No, because ultimately there are aspects of this that means your website will be easier to crawl from a machine perspective. So as an example, putting alternate wording, alternate text on images on your website, instead of Google just making no assumptions or just throwing the image out, it will now have some text against this image, which will help it to be able to show up in image search or honestly better understand the content on the page. Putting together HTML sitemaps, again, is a way that the search engines can understand how things fit together, like as far as a hierarchy goes, using proper header tags as well. Again, understand the hierarchy of a given page. All of that from a technical perspective will help. It's just that implementing some of the again, very specific features for accessibility, like screen reader tools, does not actually help. So there is still a significant benefit to be gained there.
Yeah, for SEO, yeah, everything you do for accessibility benefits you for SEO. Like you mentioned, image alt text, so the images show up in image search. When they search for products, they may go to that product page because the image had proper alt text. Another one is page titles themselves. Each page title WCAG requires it be unique and meaningful, and that's really important for your search. And also the headings and proper levels, and just proper navigational structure. That all benefits you for search engine optimization.
Absolutely. Good. Okay, so let's start getting into the nitty gritty stuff. Talking about compliance. Paul, what do you got here?
Yeah, so I've said WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That is the international accessibility standard developed by the W3C, who also develops, the HTML standard. It has 3 levels, and the higher the level is, the better for the user. But what you're legally required to implement on your side is level A and level AA. Level AAA are sort of usability enhancements or best practices that are nice to have for your website, but they may be a little bit hard for you to achieve if you're also just trying to achieve level A and AA first. So you could consider level AAA after you've met level A and AA, but you're only legally required for level A. Right now, the version of WCAG that's legally required is WCAG 2.1, and they're about to release WCAG 2.2. But that one's not really legally required yet, but it does have some new requirements coming out. And if you're building a new website, you might want to think about WCAG 2.2 in designing the new site.
Okay, very good. One thing is that as you're listening to this, you might say, but Joseph, like what, and Paul, I guess, what is, like, how do we understand where we are at with this, where we are currently standing? And so there are 2 Chrome extensions, Wave and Axe. I don't understand the process of naming these. Paul, I don't know if you have thoughts on this, but there's some very uniquely named tools in this space. But basically, they spit out something that looks like this. And I pulled this on our swiftotter.com website. You can see there's a couple of areas we need to do some work ourselves on. And basically it just says, hey, here are the problems. Here's what's done well as well. It's nice to always get a pat on the back when things are done right. And here's what you also need to improve on as well. So that takes like a minute, honestly, maybe plus or minus, but roughly about a minute in order to get that. And you kind of start getting a feeling for where things are at from a very general basic perspective.
Yeah, and Wave is a tool that sometimes attorneys will use to check if a site's accessible.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure that these sort of tools show 0 errors, and that'll help protect you, from lawsuit.
Very good point. Excellent. So let's talk about the accessibility process. What does it take to make your site accessible? There's 2 key points, like as far as general understanding. The first thing is that it should be at the start of a build. It should be from the ground up. It's not, well, ideally, it's not something that you have to come back and retrofit. I understand that doesn't always happen, but accessibility should start at the very beginning and just be part of the project. Now, the second aspect is, though, that once you go through an audit and you get your site set, it's not a once and done. This needs to be kept up over time. As a new feature is deployed on the website, or a new app or a new module is released, then those need to be double checked for compliance as well. As new content is built out, it's easy to miss an alt tag on an image or not structure the page correctly. Accessibility needs to be a whole company program as opposed to just a one-time audit, one-time remediation, and then forgotten about for the rest of history.
Yeah, you won't be able to just fix your website and then that's going to be it. You will have to develop processes, basically insert accessibility inside all the steps of your normal software development lifecycle process, like at planning, plan to do accessibility, at design for accessibility. When you make a prototype, you test it, test it with users with disabilities as well, at all these different points. And then QA is also going to ensure it's accessible at the end. But that just has to be your normal way of doing business. Like if it's a security concern, privacy concern, or just the way you're integrating a new type of technology into your company.
Yes. So what does the process look like as you are looking to, stop the leak, deal with a lawsuit, whatever the issue is here? Here is the overview of the process. Paul, do you want to take us on a tour through this?
Yeah. Well, I think there's kind of like the process where you start, maybe if you got a lawsuit or a legal letter and your site's not accessible, like it's already out there and it's not accessible, then you're starting with an audit where we find all the problems and put them in an accessibility report, and then you want to start fixing them. That's kind of the way it's always happened, but everyone in accessibility wants to do something called shift it left, where we shift accessibility to the beginning. And it really should be, at the beginning, we're going to design the whole site to be accessible and coded. That's easy when you're starting from scratch, but most people are kind of remediating. So you'll get a report with, it could be 50 to 100 issues, and then you may want to prioritize them, decide, what are the minor ones. We may save those for later. Let's focus on the critical blocker issues, things that stop the user from finding and purchasing a product on your site is the most important, fixing those user and then you might put those into like your issue tracking system like Jira or whatever you use, and assign the bugs to developers, and then you just go to fixing everything.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes sense. And then once everything is done, make sure to verify it. And then again, it's important to keep that up. And I really liked your call out there, Paul, about Wave and the tool that lawyers use. If lawyers are using something to scan websites, looking for potential targets, then making sure that has 0 issues will greatly reduce your scope on your footprint on their radars.
Yeah, they're not always going to turn on a screen reader and manually test your site because that's kind of
Mhm.
beyond, their skill set typically. But everyone can use an automated tool like Wave, especially if you're trying to sell products to the government or anyone. They can quickly test it out with Wave, and if they see you've got problems, they're just going to assume you're not accessible, and that is something you want to avoid.
Mhm. Yes, very, very good point. One thing that I like to bring up is, people always ask, okay, well, how much is this going to cost? Now, obviously, it's impossible to say without an audit being done. However, you probably can figure on roughly once you have the audit, figure on 5 to 10 hours per blocker. And obviously, that's going to vary depending on the blocker. Some might be half an hour to fix. Some might be, say, 20 hours to fix. Just depends. There's a huge amount of volatility with the type of blocker that you're running into. But you can probably take a fairly safe estimate of 5 to 10 hours per blocker and just kind of estimate that out across whoever's doing the work on your website, as far as a very rough estimate for this type of work.
Yeah, accessibility is more expensive when you have to do it after you built the site. It's kind of like if you built a building and then you add the elevator after you already built it, or you try to
That's a good point. Mm-hmm.
after you already built the stairs. It's not going to look good. It's going to be more expensive, and no one's going to be happy about it. But when you do it all at the beginning, then everyone's on board, and it doesn't take as much time or money at that point.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Another aspect is, and I looks like I duplicated my text over here. Consider testing with applicable personas. So, and one aspect of this would be to use a user testing service if you wanting to be extra cautious in this area. There's these two options here: Make It, Fable, and Nobility. Both have options for people with specific disabilities to work through your website and with a screen reader, using keyboard only navigation, etc., to be able to fully understand that you have completely vetted these particular aspects of your site as fully as possible.
Yeah, for personas, those are like your examples of your typical customer that comes to your site. It's
Mm-hmm.
a certain person who has a certain job and they have certain hobbies, but you want to make a persona that has a disability and have a variety of personas with disabilities, like a blind user, someone who's deaf, and that way your designers know, I have to build a website that's going to work for blind. And then when you test the website, you test the prototype, you test it with those users with disabilities. And like Nobility, their program's called Access Works, and they can recruit people who have different types of disabilities or use different assistive technologies. And then you basically run the same sort of a usability test you do with all users, but here you're going to get a lot more feedback from users with disabilities. And you record that, record their screen, and then you can see the problems and clearly show everyone we've got accessibility we need to fix.
Yeah, exactly. Let's in our final couple minutes here, let's break down some specifics. And there's a lot more than we're going to cover here, but some of the some aspects that can be immediately thought of, that are more content focused as opposed to technical focused. So obviously there's aspects in technical and just making sure that a screen reader can properly work through this, or keyboard only navigation can properly tab through the website or navigate the website. We're not going to be talking about that as much. That's more for developers and technical teams to resolve those type of issues. But looking at a few things, for example, I mentioned this previously, the contrast ratio. So contrast ratio should be 4.5, 4.5 to 1 or better. So this right here, this text is a 5.44 to 1 contrast ratio, which is what this bold is here. And obviously, and for large text, so this would possibly qualify as large text. Doesn't have to be quite such a big ratio. This is a 4.5 contrast down here at the bottom. It's still somewhat readable, but you get outside, someone with vision disabilities, and this can become very difficult to see. So the most practical place that I see this lived out that would fail this test is hero images. banner images on a website, slider images, whatever you want to call it, carousel. There's like 50 different names for that. But as we're building it out with a picture and text on it, it's easy to miss those contrast ratios. And someone even without a vision disability has trouble sometimes seeing what's on there. So working to enforce high contrast in those, even if you don't like get super specific, okay, is it 4.5 to 1 or ultimately 7 to 1 for level 3, I believe, level AAA on the WCAG requirements. This is going to be helpful regardless across the board.
Yeah, what I see, usually like a color I'd see here with this blue would be white text on the blue. And then that's pretty low contrast. But designers like that. They like the really light colors. Usually these are younger folks too who are designers and they have great monitors. So it's for, your designers to notice bad contrast. So it is good to have some rules like these contrast ratios. There's testing tools to help you test for them. And also built into the design tools people use like Figma, you can get plugins that will do contrast testing. So your designers, I want them to figure that out for you and not have those contrast problems go to the developers or go to the website when it's launched.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one is that visual media should be captioned. So alternate descriptions for images. So if you're putting together some content, buying guide, something along those lines, the images in there should have a caption for each one of those. Again, it's beneficial for search engine optimization. That's like on the top 10 checklist for SEO. I mean, it's just like, it's really critical there, and yet it's easy to miss. For videos, we've used Rev and Otter.ai for those. I really tried, unfortunately, to get captioning going for this today, that I had some technological breakdowns that unfortunately prevented that. But those are tools. But the recording of this will have captions from one of these two tools here. Otter AI is cheaper, not quite as accurate. Rev is human transcriptions, and it's really excellent.
Yeah, and it is, caption videos did kind of gain some importance, like with social media, like Facebook. When you have a video through your stream, not everyone wants to listen to the video and turn on the audio, but if it has the captions, then they're going to be more engaged and they might actually watch. Whereas if it didn't have the captions, they might just keep scrolling.
Yep, exactly. And again, one thing I forgot to say, Rev is still honestly super cheap. It's $1.50 a minute, I think, for captioning services. So again, super cheap, and you get a benefit across for everybody by using this.
Yeah, captions are often you can outsource that to other companies who specialize in accessible media, because that may just take too much time for your employees to do. But it's something you can do. Just there's a bit of a learning curve to doing it.
Yep, exactly. Another one is, as I'm going to do right now, all baked in text should be read out loud. So if we have a ad or something like that, and we put a phone number on there or a website on there, just because it's visual does not mean somebody who has a vision. Well, if it's visual, it means someone with a vision disability who is reliant on a screen reader, for example, would not be able to understand that your phone number is on this slide or your website or whatever other text is on there. So that makes it, honestly, it makes it very difficult for them to be doing that. So you kind of have both of those aspects, just to make sure that what is baked into the video is read out loud, as well as the audio is then produced also in text format.
Yeah, for videos, you're solving for people who are deaf by using captions because they can't hear them. And then you also need audio descriptions for people who are blind. So if you have your website URL, your phone number in the video, a blind person won't see that phone number. So then they'll need a narrator who just speaks out that text, and then they'll hear the number.
Absolutely. All right. So, Paul, I think you had you want to do a quick screen reader demo, and I think, and I was really excited about this because it's easy to say, okay, we're going to make our website accessible, but until we actually see some of the challenges that people have using accessible technology or tools, it's easy to call it, discount it. Maybe, I don't know if that's the best word, to say, hey, this, yeah, it's important, but we don't actually appreciate the challenges or the difficulties that they have actually in using our website until we see a demo of that. So he's going to be able, he'll share his, I think you're going to share your screen, right, Paul?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Wait 1 minute and it'll be right up. Here we go.
Okay, so the screen should be up, and I'm going to turn the screen reader on. You may not be able to hear the screen reader, but I do have the voiceover caption panel. I'm using a Mac with the built-in screen reader made by Apple. It comes with your computer, and it's also on an iPhone and iPad. But it has a caption panel so you can see what the screen reader is saying. And then as a user, they just navigating through the site. What I'm showing right now is a inaccessible website, a demonstration of a bad website, and then I'll show the good version of the website after, and you can see the differences. So the user would navigate through, and they're focusing on images that have no alt text, so the image file name is being spoken, such as horizontal lines. These horizontal lines here, they shouldn't be spoken. It looks like the focus isn't matching up exactly with the line, but that's probably just a bug. Then you also test things out like forms. So it just says edit text,
which is obviously meaningless.
So those labels have to be spoken out loud. So let me just show you the accessible version of the site, and let me know if you have any comments or anything. Happy to address them. But on this site, so they also have click here links, which are you're not supposed to use click here links. Looks like I can't see my focus outline very well either when I'm trying to tab around. I don't see a good focus outline indicator. So I was trying to tab to this click here link. So I want to see the accessible version of the same page. Click here, and then now we do see the focus outline when tabbing as well. And of course, the links are all meaningful. They don't just click here. But let me turn on the screen reader.
Look at the difference. That's crazy.
So it's reading the alt text. And of course, these don't say arrow left and arrow right. They say next slide, previous slide. You go through the form inputs. Yeah, that's a quick demo using the screen reader, showing those problems. And we did talk about Wave too, so you could run this sort of site through Wave, and we can see what kind of errors it finds. And Wave is saying there's 21 errors, and then Wave lets you click on each little icon to explain the problem. There's no heading structure. There's no alt text for the images. The form fields have no label. Now, if you were to go to the accessible version, Wave will give you a much different report. It says there's 0 errors, so that's good. It does say there's 3 contrast errors. It does sometimes you could get false positives. Or a tool might tell you it's failing something, but I don't know. And then sometimes you have to look at the code to see. This is an RA live region. Like this is some screen reader text. There's a way to fix this. If we just gave this good contrast, then we could make this error go away. And I would suggest making the errors go away just so people don't think that you have any accessibility issues. But we're only down to 3, and that's really good compared to 21 before.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good. And I think those practical demonstrations, as you can see, they can basically make or break the usability of your website by just with some of these things. And again, some of these issues are definitely more difficult to fix, like perhaps some of the tab related, keyboard related navigation stuff. But there's stuff that you can fix right now today, and that would be like using click here. Not using click here, using actual verbiage in the link. There was somebody we worked with a long time ago that was every link had to be click here. and it was a violation of this type of rule, and it just doesn't make sense overall. Like, I mean, it may be for the 90s it worked, but it just doesn't have to be click here anymore. So these type of things, making sure images have their, like we walked through, making sure images have their alt text, those type of things are things that can be done today by your internal content teams, and then planning out the remediation if there is problems, etc., across for the rest of the issues that are found by an audit.
Yeah. Anything
Excellent.
you'd like me to show, or you may stop sharing now?
I think we are good, Paul. Thank you. I appreciate that. That is excellent. Thank you. I'm going to pop my slides up because we have one final thing left, and that is Q&A. Is there any questions? And if so, we'd be happy to answer them. If not, it's been a pleasure chatting with you all and sharing about this. I will say that Paul is absolutely excellent with these audits. He's done a whole bunch of them. Again, works for some really high profile companies. So I put on the webinar, so I feel like I can do a plug for him. I don't benefit from said plug, just because we're buddies. We just I like to help him out in any way possible, and he is really excellent at what he does. So if you're looking for an audit, I can highly recommend his services for doing an audit like that. He'll turn over every rock and make sure that you know exactly what it takes to get your website in compliance with these rules. Any questions before we close it down for the day? All right. Well, I'm not hearing of any questions coming in. So, Paul, thank you. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. Some great knowledge here, and look forward to continuing to work together in the future.
Yeah, Joseph, thanks for inviting me. I'm always happy to chat about accessibility. It's a passion of mine.
Definitely, I can see that.
We can
I appreciate it.
move the web.
That's good.
Make it more accessible, and I'd love to do that. So thanks a lot for having me.
My pleasure. It was good having you on here, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all, everyone.
All right.
Have a good day.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.